Molly here. Before we get started on this week's recap and review of Star Trek Discovery, I just want to say how humbled and overwhelmed I am by the response that we received from our call for subscribers to help us reach the 1,000 subscriber threshold for monetization. We gained 99 subs as of the recording of this video from last week. That is far more than I thought we were going to get, and as I said, I'm just blown away by the response that we've gotten. Thank you. I really appreciate what everyone has done for us, and also I just want to say if there are any other small channels who are in the same boat that we are, YouTube is running ads on your stuff and you have fewer than 1,000 subs, so you can't get monetized and get that money that YouTube is making off of you. Go ahead and drop your channel's name in the comments so we can go ahead and subscribe to you, and maybe some of our other subscribers might do as well. Thank you. I'd also like to give a shout out to the channels of C.H. Danhauser and Star Trek Nitpickers. They both gave us a shout out, and we received a number of new people coming over to our channel and subscribing thanks to what they did for us. Again, I don't know how to thank you guys other than to say thank you. We really appreciate it. I just feel like those of us who are voices in the wilderness on this stuff really need to stick together, and I appreciate that it looks like you guys must feel the same way. So thanks. Anyway, I guess back to Star Trek Discovery, why we're all here. I will give the synopsis of what happened in this episode, and then we will talk about it. Star Trek Discovery, Season 5, Episode 3, Janal. We start the episode with Book giving Michael Burnham and Dr. Culber background information on Mal. She was born on a rough planet. Her dad left when she was 8. Her dad used to talk about how he wanted to fix things with her, but he never got the chance. Her mom died when she was 14, she became a courier, and she did 2 stints in an emerald chain lockup. She's been through a lot. As if this excuses her from causing an avalanche in episode 1 that would have killed everyone in that village if Michael Burnham hadn't made the Disco and Rayner's ships ram into the ground and used their shields to block the sand and rocks. Of course, we have no further information on Locke, because I'm sure it'll just turn out that he was the bad guy who manipulated poor Mal into doing these horrible things because she had no family. The next clue to finding whatever it is that the Progenitors left behind is on Trill. The metal piece of map recovered in the previous episode has Trill markings on the side. Each Trill's markings are unique, like fingerprints or a whale's tail. They are able to determine that these markings are from a Trill that lived 800 years earlier by the name of Janal Bix. The Bix symbiont is still alive, so Michael Burnham makes arrangements to meet with the current host. The pizza cutter uses its mushroom drive and jumps to Trill. Trill, however, won't let Michael Burnham beam down until she answers a question pertaining to the poem they found on the Stella in the previous episode. Michael Burnham gets it right, so she's welcome to beam down. Michael Burnham asks if there's anything else that the guy can tell her, but he was only instructed to ask the question. From here on, everything is up to Michael Burnham. Michael Burnham, Book, Dr. Culber, and Adira beam down to the caves on Trill. They meet with an elderly Trill who's relieved Michael Burnham has finally come so she can give her knowledge to Michael Burnham and then finally rest. Michael Burnham has to talk to Janal directly, so they will have to perform a Shantara, a ritual that will allow Janal's consciousness to pass to another body. This explains why Dr. Culber is on this mission instead of being in sickbay. They're going to use his body as a vessel for Janal. The head Trill guy warns that this can be an emotionally overwhelming experience, and Dr. Culber says that emotionally overwhelming is what he does best. So Janal goes into Dr. Culber, and it's revealed that Wilson Cruz actually can act. It's just that the Dr. Culber character is written so poorly that it makes it appear that he can't. Somehow they managed to get more personality into a one-off character in a single episode than they managed to write into a character that's now been on the show for his 5th season. Janal says that he hid the clue in some canyon and he wants to walk there. Michael Burnham and Book have no choice but to follow. Adira stays behind with Gray. Long story short, the canyon is another test where Janal puts the lives of Michael Burnham, Book, innocent wild animals, and a bunch of their eggs in danger. For some reason, Dr. Culber doesn't reassert himself and lets Janal do this in spite of it being established in Deep Space Nine that he could reestablish his own personality. Michael Burnham realizes that they are the invaders into these creatures' nesting area and puts her phaser away in an attempt to show that she and Book are not a threat. Book then uses his ability to communicate with animals to let them know that he and Michael Burnham are leaving. The animals let them go, and when confronted, Janal says that Michael Burnham and Book's behavior toward the animals was a test. They passed, so he gives them the next clue. But had they failed, he would have let the creatures kill them. Where the clue was actually hidden, who knows, because it certainly would not have been just sitting in a pile of rocks on top of a boulder for the last 800 years. Janal leaves Dr. Culber and goes back into the old lady. Dr. Culber, Book, and Michael Burnham go back to the ship, leaving Adira on the planet. The old lady says now she can rest. Michael Burnham and Dr. Culber meet up in their version of 10 Forward and talk philosophy and religion. Michael Burnham and Dr. Culber are uncomfortable with the idea that not everything needs to have an answer. Michael Burnham says that maybe by the end of the journey to find the technology of the beings that designed life as they know it, they'll find the answers they need. The episode ends with what I assume is the old lady's death and the symbiont being released back into the symbiont pool and swimming away. They weren't really clear on what happened, so that's my assumption. At the end of the ritual, everyone hugs, and the audience sees that Mal is one of the hooded individuals, and she placed something on Adira's sleeve when they embraced, which promptly disappears. I assume it's probably a tracking device, and I find it hard to believe that the ship won't detect it when Adira beams up, but whatever. Also in this episode, Gray and Adira break up, Saru and the Vulcan president decide to announce their engagement in spite of the likely blowback that will come from Vulcan purists. Tilly instructed Commander Rayner on how to be less competent as a commander and instead be friends with his subordinates. Stamets figured out some of the information from the Romulan tricorder. He figured out that the Progenitors' tech could be used to design new life forms, accelerate evolution, modify ecosystems, and, in theory, reanimate the dead. Rayner points out how dangerous that would be in the wrong hands, and Stamets responds, "Yeah, but think about all the good it could do in the right ones." The episode ends with a voiceover of Gray and a montage of the characters of the episode, and Gray saying things like, choosing to connect with others and ourselves, and how we're all looking for meaning in our lives, and the connections we make will lead us to meaning. The end. I hated this episode. The first 2 episodes of this season, I could get past the insipid stuff that was included, but this episode was insipid wall to wall. Not only that, just their dime store childish philosophy just rubbed me the wrong way in a manner that I have trouble putting into words because I'm kind of angry. Actually, not kind of. I am apparently very disturbed and angry about what they did here, especially with the dumbing down of a commander who used to be a captain who seems to have a good grasp on the chain of command that's necessary to properly run a starship. What they did there with Tilly being so insubordinate, I don't even know where to begin with explaining to people what was wrong with that if they don't already understand.
When Strange New Worlds started and they introduced the Hemmer character in that first episode, I did not like him. But as the series went on, they were introducing character elements to Hemmer that made him probably my favorite character that Secret Hideout has ever introduced in their run for these series. And this Rayner character in this episode, I actually liked this guy. And the reason I liked this guy was Rayner, what he was telling Tilly was what a lot of us have been trying to tell this series as we yell at our television set. The SS feelings isn't going to get stuff done. And Rayner was a very, I'm going to study everything I can to figure out the next move of these two people, Mal and Locke. Mm-hmm. The interaction with Tilly, almost every exchange Rayner had, I turned to Molly and fist pumped up in the air because I've been wanting to say this stuff for 4 seasons leading up to this.
That's because he understands that the mission is more important than their stupid feelings.
There were lines in this from Tilly that my mouth gaped open at the stupidity of what she was saying. For instance, Rayner was spending his time going through every piece of evidence he could find to try to predict where the next clue would be. Tilly walks in and Rayner explains something to her that he found, and Tilly was like, Zora already told me that, meaning that ship's computer. And I'm scratching my head thinking of, if anybody's seen the film Demolition Man and that society that they had of those childlike, emotional level citizens, and that demonstrated exactly what Tilly and the rest of that Discovery crew is. And Rayner's sitting there trying to do hard work and basically reinforce what I've watched Star Trek for all these decades, is that human beings are remarkable creatures, and although computers can be tools that these human beings can use, it's still human beings, human judgment that should win out in the end. That's what Star Trek has constantly reinforced time and time again. To me, anyway. And so when Tilly had that quick line about, oh, Zora already told me that, basically saying that Rayner was wasting his time. Because the Rayner story, what was happening was as Michael Burnham was down on Trill investigating the clues, she told Rayner to get to know the crew a bit. I don't know if he was asked to do like personal evaluations or not.
Yes, Michael Burnham had, I guess, ordered him to spend time with each crew member and get to know them. And I guess Tilly was supposed to show him around the ship so that he could go around the ship and talk to people. Which, admittedly, I can see the value in him going around the ship and being visible on the ship so that people see him and understand that he is the new second in command. I can see the value in that. However, what I don't see the value in at this point in time is going around and learning to be friends with everybody. So what Rayner did, he didn't completely refuse the order, although he definitely found a way to twist it to something else. He told Tilly that he wanted everyone brought to him, and then he would give them, I guess, 20 words to tell him something that wasn't in their file.
Which I thought was great, because if you don't know who you are, you're going to struggle doing that exercise. And I thought that was a great way to touch with every person on the ship that Tilly was having him interview so that he could get a better feel for what this person is that's not part of the record.
Yeah, and a couple of them I actually appreciated because one of them actually did get right to the point that they were really into the older ships. I guess they called themselves a ship head, I guess kind of like a gearhead for nowadays terms. And the other one that I appreciated, this is one of the few times that I actually enjoyed Jet Reno, because her response to this whole thing was, are there going to be chips? Last time there were chips. And she showed about as much interest in doing this crap as Rayner did. So I actually appreciated that in this situation.
Yeah, we were laughing. What would have made a more interesting story to me is if the person they had assisting Rayner was Jet Reno. So that there could be comments like, yeah, when I came on board, this crew was all hugging and crying in corners, and it was weird to me too. But these people seem to know mostly what they're doing. You just have to get used to them being odd. And I think that would have been a much better way to handle this than the condescending way Tilly was handling this. She was insubordinate to the point where at the end, she was displaying such hypocrisy of what she was saying that that's how the episode ended, at least toward the end. And it left such a bad taste in my mouth with what they had Tilly doing.
Because it was clear he wasn't the second in command. She was.
Yep. Tilly's argument, and I guess this reflects Michael Burnham, is that the only way to show that you care about your crew is to be friends with them. And she was lipping off to this guy, Rayner, the entire episode. In fact, there was an exchange where she requested permission to speak freely. He didn't grant it. She did it anyway, and then he reminded her, I didn't grant you permission to speak freely. And then later on, when Rayner did this brilliant thing with Stamets, because Stamets came in for his interview, and he had some extra information, so Rayner realized that and said, okay, I'm going to give you more than 20 words. What you got going on?
Well, first, Stamets came in and apologized for being late, but it's because he was actually working on that Romulan tricorder. Rayner actually told him, oh, so this was a mission critical that you were working on, and yes, sir, okay, that's fine, because you were actually working on the mission.
So Rayner was taking great interest in what Stamets was saying, and then as soon as Stamets started prattling on about stuff that was irrelevant to the mission, he basically said, okay, that's enough, thanks, bye. And then right after that, Tilly said, I know you won't give me permission to speak freely, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then she decided to, try to explain to this guy with all her massive years of leadership expertise about how Tilly sees things. She's like, you shot him down. That's the most excited I've seen him about anything. And she was going on like there was some grade school type science project that a teacher didn't approve of. And it was just so ridiculous what Tilly was doing. She was insubordinate at that point, to the point where I just shake my head at what Tilly did. And then after that scene, then Tilly was in that 10 forward knockoff, sitting at the bar, and Rayner came in and sat down. He realized that he rubbed her the wrong way, so he initiated a conversation to try to explain how he views things. And Tilly still reinforced that, well, I don't think you're getting to know these people like Captain Burnham wanted you to. And then he started going off on their records on what they did and what he found out about their 20 words that they gave about themselves. And that one person, he actually was suggesting that this person could go beyond their hobby. And I thought at that moment that was going to be when Tilly looked at him and said, oh, people can do things differently and still get things accomplished.
Yeah, because he showed that he had a clear understanding of these people just based on reading through their files and the brief interaction with them. Because again, this guy is an alien. He's not human. He's, Kelleran? We've seen the Kelleran before. On Deep Space Nine, we saw them in the episode Armageddon Game. What was it? Season 2, episode 13. So we don't really know beyond that episode what their memory capacity is, what their understanding for just other people is.
What their culture is.
Yeah.
The Deep Space Nine episode where we saw the Kelleran before, the story was that these two sides, the Kelleran and the Talani, they used a virus to introduce what they called a gene disruptor. So they were doing biological warfare with each other, and they were trying to dismantle their program, and they had Starfleet coming in to help them dismantle the program. And it turns out that toward the end, they were trying to kill off the people from Starfleet that were helping them do that, because from their point of view, both races, the Talani and the Kelleran, they didn't want anybody else to have this knowledge. They didn't want anybody to wage war like this again. So they were going to kill off the two Starfleet personnel that had knowledge of this.
Yes, because they'd already killed off their own scientists who had knowledge of it. So they had to make sure everyone was gone.
I think that's the only episode that had the Kelleran in Star Trek lore, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But if one reads into that I can read in some personality traits of that race. They're thorough. They like to make sure that they don't leave any details uncovered. So when Tilly was trying to get condescending with this alien that does not think the way she does, Lieutenant Tilly, by the way, is telling Commander Rayner how to do leadership, when, judging by the gray in his hair, he's been doing Starfleet stuff longer than Tilly's been alive. Because as far as I can tell, Tilly's vast experience is Discovery and whatever she's doing at the Academy. So her lipping off this guy, it was at the very end, she said something like, respect goes both ways. And then she gave this really condescending look to him. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this guy realized on his own that he rubbed you the wrong way with how he handled Stamets. He didn't have to do this. He sat down with you later and was telling you why he was doing what he was doing, because he essentially explained that he believes that friendship should be separated from duty because those two things can conflict. And we saw that same type of discussion in TNG in a few episodes, but I'm thinking the season 6 episode called Lessons, where Picard had that fling with that officer that was his subordinate, and he found that because he was in a relationship with her, that he had trouble ordering her into a situation where she might end up dying. And they both realized that that would affect command judgment, so she requested a transfer to a different ship. Rayner was doing essentially the same thing, saying, look, I don't want to be your friend because I need to be a good commander for you, a good first officer. I appreciate that Tilly, one of the few things she was trying to convey and didn't, is that there's more to be said than just what a record has and 20 words to a person. But at the same time, Tilly was being so bigoted that Rayner's way of doing things was just categorically wrong based on Tilly's entire expertise as a leader. He, Rayner, chose to sit down with Tilly when he didn't have to and show Tilly respect by explaining why he was doing what he was doing. And then when Tilly says respect goes both ways, she didn't show him any respect in this entire episode. And then that smug look on her face, and then she sat at a table where a bunch of crewmen were. And I'm scratching my head at that going, what a hypocrite, because this guy showed you respect and you spit in his face.
Yeah, there were two things I want to say about that. The first one, since he's Kelleran, I just wonder, considering that episode with Deep Space Nine and his people's feelings about how that knowledge is too dangerous for people to have, I just wonder what relevance that has in this situation where we're dealing with something similar, a genetic technology, I guess we'll just say that, as they've laid out in Discovery. I'm not talking what TNG laid out, because Lord knows this is not the same thing. That is so obvious. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. I can see how his species, he's being set up to possibly be a bad guy here in trying to destroy this knowledge, or who knows, maybe Michael Burnham will realize that he's right and this knowledge is too dangerous for them to have, as set up in the Star Trek Discovery universe, because Lord knows this is all just stupid anyway.
Given Michael Burnham, she probably wants the technology so that she can use it. She hasn't seen a war crime she doesn't want to commit.
Well, like you've said, who knows, maybe it turns out that all this time, all the questions that she's had, is all because she's actually one of the progenitors, and the way they were setting things up in this episode just, as I said, they really rubbed me the wrong way. Just the messaging from the show just rubs me completely the wrong way.
It's like they made a series that's comprised entirely of Wesley Crushers.
Yes, thank you.
So that when you have an adult entering the room, well, that's an adult. That's a poo-poo head. We got to sit there and take that poo-poo head down.
Ugh. So all you have are these pretentious, self-righteous little bastards. And
hypocritical.
Yes.
Tilly was so hypocritical with her respect goes both ways, and she gives that smug look, even though Rayner's the one that showed respect by sitting down and explaining when he didn't have to why he was doing what he was doing.
And up until now, Tilly has been portrayed as the awkward one. So when she finds someone who is, in this universe, more awkward than she is, she acts like an asshole to him.
After Stamets was dismissed from Rayner when he was babbling on and Rayner didn't want to hear about it anymore, and Tilly said, well, I'm going to speak whether you give me permission or not. And then she was like holding up her fingers doing 20 words because that was the shtick that he was doing for these crew people. And she was saying something like, you were a demoted captain and you don't realize that you don't need to be a giant whatever. And I'm scratching my head going, your best friend is Michael Burnham. Michael freaking Burnham. And this is the sympathy that you give somebody who's in a similar situation as somebody who was a mutineer, got off the jail, then was demoted again after she was reinstated, and you're giving this guy crap.
Uh-huh.
And going back to the progenitors, because I think that's an interesting point, is we had a commenter point out that what they're doing in Discovery with this technology is not what was explained in the Chase episode from TNG. Because the parent race that was talking in that recording went something like, we visited your worlds when life was in its infancy, and I forget, they said something like, and then we seeded that with a direction.
The primordial oceans, I think.
So that you would take on the forms that you do now.
Like ours. The progenitors, yeah.
They did not create life. This is not the Genesis device from the Wrath of Khan that creates life out of nothing. What this is life already existed. Remember, life was in its infancy, and then they introduced some extra genetic stuff that directed the development of these races. Now, that's still a cool technology, but it's not creating life. This technology was not creating life. The progenitors said when life was in its infancy on your planets. So life already sparked. It already existed. And then they modified the direction it was going in some ways.
Yeah, I likened it to kind of like with Jurassic Park when they didn't have all the DNA necessary to restart the dinosaurs. They took amphibian DNA and added that in, and obviously that became part of what this new species of dinosaur was, giving them attributes of amphibians. I saw this as the same way, like they did some genetic editing on what was already starting.
All it did, and I say all because this is still pretty impressive, so when I say all, I'm not diminishing that this is pretty impressive, but it was able to, once life existed, push the direction of evolution in a certain direction. That's still impressive, but it's not creating life.
No, it's genetic manipulation.
I do like your theory of going back to that Deep Space Nine episode, Armageddon Game, and what that story was about the one time we did see the Kelleran. It is possible that the reason Rayner was spending all that time researching this was because specifically of the topic at hand here.
Which, again, it makes me think, so is this like a situation in The Mummy where you had that group that through the millennia had been there for the express purpose of making sure that Imhotep didn't rise from the dead? You know, is this like a Knights Templar situation where you've got this group that's their one purpose in life is to make sure that something is protected? Is that what Rayner is? Is he there to make sure that this progenitor technology does not fall into the wrong hands, or any hands for that matter?
See, that would be an interesting storyline, which tells me I don't think Discovery's going to do it.
I know, it's like, hey, that might actually be pretty cool if they created a secret society that is way cooler than, in my opinion, Section 31, especially considering there's a Section 31.
Because it's secret.
Yeah, exactly, and they were actually there to do something good instead of bad, but you can see how good intentions can be twisted, like in that Armageddon Game episode. There are things that actually could have been explored, but I think that takes a little bit more cerebral work than just the forming connections will give meaning to your life. That sounds like some sort of bizarre-ass doublespeak that you'd hear in 1984 trying to convince you to go along with the program. It just, yikes.
And I guess I should finish up the Rayner discussion here by pointing out that what they're trying to do here, I think, and by they I mean Michelle Paradise and Kurtzman, I think they're trying to make like a Captain Jellicoe from Chain of Command from TNG with Rayner. But I don't think that Alex Kurtzman and Michelle Paradise, these episodes that they are strip mining, this Deep Space Nine episode with the Kelleran, the Chain of Command with Captain Jellicoe, the TNG episode Lessons that has the lesson learned about not getting too close to your crew or you can't effectively lead them. I don't think Kurtzman and Paradise understand what's in these episodes and the chase, the concept of this whole season. I really do think that they had somebody who might be a Star Trek person. They just sat there with them and said, okay, give me some ideas of stuff that you thought was cool in these series. And they wrote them down. Maybe they went to a Star Trek convention or something and wrote them down and then said, okay, well, we're going to do what we can to strip mine this. I said this last week, and I'm going to say it again. Star Trek Picard Season 3, the iconography, the strip mining of different things from lore. And some people think that was good enough to make a proper good season, like it was any different than seasons 1 and 2 because the iconography was similar and they were calling back to older concepts that absolutely were Star Trek lore. If that's what makes you happy, to constantly live with callbacks that in a lot of cases people don't understand the callbacks, they're just phonetically like mouthing the terms or the words of a species, but nothing else they get right. If a person is okay with that, then they're probably going to like what Discovery's doing, because this showed me even more than we suspected last week that all they're planning on doing is strip mining Star Trek lore. I'm not saying build off of, because the Rayner stuff we talked about being a watcher of sorts, waiting for people to unearth this technology that they strongly disagree with as a culture, I think that's something that a good writer might actually think is a good idea to build on a concept from Deep Space Nine. But much like the changelings in Picard, people who watched Picard Season 3, do you think that built on the changelings in any useful way? Do you think it built on the Borg Queen in any useful way?
No.
Maybe they'll do this with Rayner. Based on their history, I don't think they're going to. In fact, what I think's going to happen, because the very last part of this episode, Discovery episode we're reviewing right now, when Gray was giving the narration of things, and there was some line about, or else you'll be alone, and then they showed Rayner back on that 10 forward, and showed Tilly with all of her friends talking, and Rayner sitting all alone at that bar.
Those who get it right and those who get it wrong. And it was showing Tilly as getting the connections right and Rayner as getting the connections wrong. I was just sitting there with my mouth open like, oh my God.
I was so offended by the way they were dealing with this Rayner character, because I'm going to say this to our viewers here. I actually like the Commander Rayner character. I like him. Now, they're probably going to ruin him in a couple of episodes, but this episode, when he was saying stuff I've been wanting to say and have said, but he actually did it in narrative, I was so excited he was finally saying stuff that we were all saying. Stop this hugging and crying stuff and let's get on the mission. That's essentially what he said. And, oh my gosh, that was like the best moment in Star Trek Discovery history.
Yep.
Now, I want to go back a little bit to the Michael Burnham mission on Trill when they were trying to unearth the next clue. And you touched on this a little bit in your synopsis. In the Deep Space Nine episode, Facets, I think that was called, where Jadzia went through the same ritual to break apart the parts of her symbiote, the previous hosts. It was explained by the Guardian that the person who volunteered to host the personality could exert back control anytime they wanted to. Dr. Culber never got such a statement.
Nope.
In fact, that would have been quite convenient when this guy was setting up Michael Burnham and Book to be in a very dangerous situation.
Possibly die.
Because Dr. Culber is one of the few characters on the show that actually shown some ethics. And I would have thought he would have asserted his control right then and there and said, nah, we're not doing that.
He refused to torture that tardigrade when Saru ordered him to do it. Which, again, that's like the one redeeming quality, I think, of Dr. Culber, is that he stood up to Saru when Saru was doing that horrible thing. Again, in this instance, apparently Dr. Culber's do no harm went right out the window, and he was letting this other entity, which seemed to be quite capricious with just danger and life. I mean, this thing rubbed me the wrong way, and I found it hard to believe that it was there to try to protect the universe from this knowledge, whatever. But the fact that Dr. Culber didn't reassert himself, like you just said, when Michael Burnham was in danger, Book was in danger, these creatures were in danger, kind of like a tardigrade, and the eggs of these creatures were also in danger from that situation that Janal set up. Again, how convenient for the writing staff.
The stuff they were doing on that planet, they were using those goofy personal transporters to like bounce around like there's some sort of superheroes when they were running away from those creatures. I'm just going to ask this question because this is important to me to know, because I'm building off of last week when I said their technology appears to be magic. So I remember after TOS's run, it was in 1975. There's been many of these things, by the way, many tech manuals, but there's two big ones that I remember. So in 1975, after the TOS run, there was the Starfleet Technical Manual by Franz Joseph. And during the TNG run, the Berman era run, in 1991, and this is probably the one that most of our viewers remember, was the Star Trek TNG Technical Manual by Steinbach and Okuda. And in that one, they explain how the holodeck works, they explain how the transporter works, they explain how the propulsion system works. So what I'm asking is, I'm struggling with this Discovery Secret Hideout technology because it appears like magic. And in all the other iterations before Secret Hideout, what would happen is the audience was on the same level as the crew that was doing these things. So the phasers, the warp drive, we were considered equals when it came to when we were watching the narrative of what was happening. We were taught how they worked. And obviously these technical manuals came either after or during a run to help fill in those details. Well, the way Discovery works is it's like they are pushing the audience outside the inner circle of the bridge. We're just left to kind of observe these technologies like we're some primitive race and seeing this magic. And what I'm asking is, does anybody know of a Star Trek Discovery technical manual? Because maybe if I read how this stuff is supposed to work, it would be less jarring for me when they use it. Because it seems like it's all random when they use it. It doesn't have any rhyme or reason. At least that's how it appears to me, the little primitive cave person that I am, watching them do these things. Because I saw somebody online last week when they were defending ramming those starships into the dirt to try to divert that avalanche. And what this person said was, well, you have to understand it's magical 31st or 32nd century technology. And I'm scratching my head going, what? Sure, it's in that era, but why won't they, like any other iteration of Star Trek, explain to us how this technology works, what the limitations of this technology are? Every other iteration did that. There are manuals. I listed 2, but when I went to Wikipedia, there were like 15 or 20 of them listed. And they stopped in like 2007. So there's been a shift in opinion where we were in on the technology, because a lot of people, if you look at like YouTube channels, they get into like starship design and they follow as closely as they can to the technical rules that were set up for these universes. And a lot of the Star Trek fan base, at least the older ones, pre-JJ, they got into that stuff and they loved, the more you could learn about the technology in that world, the better.
Well, how many scientists were spawned by watching Star Trek?
And engineers, right.
Yeah.
So how many engineers are going to be spawned by a starship sticking itself out of a beach and having their nacelles floating like randomly behind it? Like, how does that work? If the ship loses power, wouldn't those things just float away? That just seems like a problem to me.
I don't know. Shouldn't they fall on the ground, maybe? Because they're in atmosphere, not out in
on
space.
that planet. But I'm thinking in space, if they lost power, wouldn't they just float away? Depending on what the inertia is, if the whole body's moving in one direction or not. I'm not even trying to say that I know for sure that Discovery's science makes no sense. What I'm asking for is, could somebody please share a Star Trek Discovery technical manual? Preferably a book. I'm big into like reading paper, but even a PDF would work, of how the Star Trek Discovery technology works. If I understood how the personal transporters worked, I'd understand better, because there was a part of this episode where Book got hurt, and they were trying to tap their comm badges to escape, but they couldn't contact the ship because they were, what did Michael Burnham say? They were too close to the cliff face or something like that.
Yeah, the rocks were interfering.
But then she was able to turn her phaser into like one of those dermal regenerators using that, whatever the hell they do to make the phasers appear. And I'm like, well, how does that work? I just assumed that this stuff was like a Wi-Fi point and you still had to communicate with the ship, and that it was the ship that was doing all the transferring of matter around. So now it's that little comm badge that's doing all of that?
Yep.
And then when Michael Burnham solved the riddle, I suppose, of how to get by those creatures, basically surrendering and admitting that they are, this is their territory. And what she said is, we had to get rid of the phasers because the phasers were showing we were a threat. Well, those creatures were clearly intelligent. They saw how stuff magically appeared in your hands. In fact, when she got rid of the phaser, all it did was dematerialize. If I was those creatures, I'd be like, yeah, you're showing me your open palms right now, but like, your magic can make that thing reappear like in 2 seconds. Again, I don't know the rules. Sometimes they tap their badge twice and it does something. I don't know what the rules are for technology in this universe. So if anybody has a technical manual for this universe, could you please share it in the comments below? Because maybe it would seem less random to me, because right now it just seems like they're making crap up as they're going.
I think they are.
And then people are associating that with, again, anybody who disagrees with what I'm saying here, go look at that 1991 TNG technical manual. Look at that. It's not just, the Trek fans make up stuff on the fly too. No, they're still following a set of rules that was laid out in a technical manual. Whereas Discovery just seems to be making stuff up on the fly because it makes sense. Programmable matter, we'll use that. Well, what is that? What are the rules of that? It doesn't matter. Personal transporters, how does that work? Is it in the comm badge? That itty bitty comm badge can do all that? I assumed it was some Wi-Fi hotspot to the ship. I have no idea how that works. When you touch your badge 2 times, what does that do? If you touch it 3 times, does it do something else? How do you make the phaser appear in your hand? I don't see them tapping their badges for that, but maybe I'm missing that. Do they just wish it into existence? Because I asked Molly this last night. I said, how did she make that appear in her hand? And Molly said, she just wished it into existence. And again, the person who says, well, that's just 31st or 32nd century magic, the fact that they're not interested in how this technology is supposed to work, they're just, TOS was magic to me and TNG was magic to me. I never really had an explanation for that. Yes, you did. Now, it was made up stuff, but it's no more made up than, like, at least with Harry Potter, you can look up what the spells are supposed to do.
Logic within the universe.
Internal logic.
Yeah.
So you can look these up in the technical manual. So if you think TOS or TNG operate technology-wise the same as Discovery, then you're not familiar with the technical manuals. And I would say, why don't you look those up, see what's outlined there, and then come back and say, yeah, Discovery works the same way.
Yep.
At the end of the episode, when Dr. Culber and Michael Burnham were in their 10 forward talking, I didn't understand why he was talking to Michael Burnham. I don't know if maybe I just blinked out of my memory that they had a friendship, but I would have thought that Dr. Culber would be sitting there pondering these things, either with his partner, Stamets, or possibly with Book, because you pointed out last night that in addition to the therapy sessions they were doing, that they have like a similar experience here that maybe they could have talked about. It would have made more sense for Book to be talking to Culber than Michael Burnham.
Yeah, because Book and his ability to telepathically communicate with animals, I can see how that could be a similar experience to having another personality in your head. I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but again, communicating with another entity within your own head, because obviously, and I'm drawing on the Deep Space Nine episode, not what we saw in this thing, but especially when Odo and Curzon were in Odo's body and the way that they were forming yet a new entity. But anyways, the point is,
it was kind of like Tuvix from Voyager.
It was very much like that. But again, it was communicating, 2 entities in the same mind communicating with each other. And I can see how that would be something that Book and Culber could have shared, and maybe Book could have helped Culber to try to understand that better. But that's not what we got. We got that weird conversation between Dr. Culber and Michael Burnham about having to know all the answers and to find the technology of the entities that created life as they know it. I mean, again, this is just a very much a search for God kind of narrative this season, and I'm just not comfortable with this group of writers writing a narrative like that.
And I just want to say, there are episodes of Picard Season 3 that we actually did enjoy, but it was for the wrong reasons. It was for how ridiculous what they were doing. For instance, when the Penguin cut off her hand, it turned into a head, and then it started yelling at her. Or when they used a tractor beam to chuck starships around. Or when they were birthed out of some...
The nebula.
Yeah, the nebula...
Gave birth to them, and then a bunch of little creatures.
And Conrad Farpoint creatures were around there. So
yeah.
That sort of stuff was funny, so we laughed and we enjoyed it because it made us laugh. Saru and the president of Nevar.
Oh, God.
This made me laugh so much. The president's, one of her assistants, was concerned about the president announcing her marriage with Saru upcoming. And so he approached Saru and basically said, you're going to ruin this person's career if you continue with this. So Saru, we have to remember, Saru hanging around these Vulcans, this is new to him. So what he ended up doing, which wasn't right, because he was robbing the president of some agency here, but he was trying to say, look, I don't want to mess up your career, and maybe we shouldn't go through with this. And the president got all bent out of shape about that, at least Vulcan bent out of shape. And that dialogue, I mean, the actual scenario I set up, that's not the funny part. It's Saru was sitting there like on this couch, sipping this cup of tea, and he was all looking mousy, like waiting for the president to blow up or whatever. And then after she was upset with him, she just walked out of the room and left Saru there, and they had this shot of Saru just kind of like staring off into space. And remembering Saru's people, and they appear to be a very emotion-driven species, hence that whole fear thing. And everybody, think about this. Given this scene, do you think this marriage is going to last for more than a year or two?
All of the other couples on this episode made Michael Burnham and Book look like they were functional. That's how bad all of this was. There's no way that Saru and the president of Vulcan, I can't recall her name at the moment, there's no way they should be getting married. There just isn't.
Saru eventually might be able to give the president what she needs, but the president is not ever going to be able to give Saru what he needs to be in a relationship.
No, it's such a mismatch.
It's going to turn into an abusive relationship, an emotional abusive relationship.
Because she's a Vulcan.
Yeah. She wouldn't be doing it on purpose. It's just the nature of it. She's not able to give Saru anything, and he's in a very emotional species. To the point, like I said, those fear things that he had in the back of his neck. Like, their whole species is emotional.
Well, again, you don't take a character who wants to do nothing but talk about their feelings and pair them up with a Vulcan, a proper Vulcan.
So it may show a darker side to me, but when I was watching that whole dress down that the president was giving Saru, and he was mousily sitting there, you could tell inside he was breaking, like his heart was breaking, and I laughed out loud because it's like, This is such a ridiculous relationship. So for me, the dark nature of me and the Saru president stuff made me laugh. So I enjoyed the episode for that, again, in a very, very dark way. And then the Rayner stuff, when he was finally telling these people what we've all been saying, I don't have any regrets about that. There's no dark humor there. All I'm going to say is you continue, Rayner. Don't be listening to Tilly about how that's wrong what you're doing, because how bigoted of her, this whole series and the people behind the scenes. It's all about diversity and inclusion. And not just behind the scenes, right? You're going to do it on screen. So you've got this different species, Rayner, who does things differently. That doesn't mean it's wrong. What it means, Tilly, is he was trying to understand a little bit of your point of view by communicating to you why he was doing what he was doing. You didn't even acknowledge that was valid. You were basically saying, well, that's stupid. That's not how it should work on this ship. You're an idiot, and you should think about that. And isn't the whole concept of Starfleet is that these cultures should be melding together? If this guy was a Vulcan, would Tilly be yelling at the Vulcan? You gotta go in and spend time and play cards and do all these other things with your crewmates. Maybe Rayner just doesn't want to do that. I mean, the same way Spock wasn't going to hang out and do all sorts of rec roomy stuff. That doesn't mean that Spock didn't care about the crew in his own way, or that the crew didn't respect him and that he didn't respect the crew.
Well, it's like those assholes who think that all introverts should be forced to become extroverts.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling Molly this. Anybody ever get forced to work in an open office? I sure did. We used to have cubicles and they jammed us into an open office. I hated that. I became less efficient with that. All I did was put my headphones on and created a virtual cubicle around me. And if people remember WKRP from the 70s and Les Nessman, remember when he put down tape so he was trying to make walls for himself so he could feel like he had an office? That's how I was doing in that crappy open office. I appreciate young people may want to work in these playground groups and do work together, but some of us don't work like that. It doesn't mean I'm saying that your way of working doesn't help you, but boy, I didn't like it when they were assuming that my way of working was invalid and that I had to get used to being in an open office. And that's how I saw what Tilly was doing to Rayner. It was disgusting.
And then don't get me started on Adira and Gray's relationship. That was one of the most cringy things I have seen in a long time, those two breaking up. I mean, I'm glad because that crap is over, thank God. But it's like these writers don't know how to write proper romantic relationships, or even friendships for that matter, because a romantic relationship should be based on friendship first. You look at Saru and the president of Nevar, and I guess there's a friendship there, but meditating together isn't enough to base a marriage on. Like, what is wrong with these people? I mean, at least they allowed the distance and the pursuing of their careers to cause Gray and Adira to split, but they're still going to be friends. I mean, I guess that's okay, but
I'm still confused because all the other issues they were giving on why their relationship wasn't going to work. How about you're a freaking robot now?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So it was bizarre. It was utterly bizarre, but again, at least they're not in a romantic relationship anymore. So we don't have to talk about the fact that Adira's significant other is a robot.
Well, and that's the question that I had for Molly when we were watching this. Because when I watch this stuff, I have to like compartmentalize this Discovery stuff in my brain or it'll cause me to lose brain cells. And so I was asking Molly, does Adira still have the symbiont inside of them? And I think we both agreed the answer was yes.
In the episode, the Guardian explicitly said that someone who already had a symbiont wouldn't be able to take in Janal's personality. That's why it had to be Culber, because, again, how convenient that just the four of them came down from the ship. So it's clear that Adira must still be joined.
So when we watched that Deep Space Nine episode Facets, and we got to see pieces of the Dax previous hosts, one got a feeling that when we see Jadzia Dax on this series, the Deep Space Nine series, that it really is a compilation of all these different hosts, plus what Jadzia brings to the table. But it seems like Adira is just this inexperienced person trying to figure life out, Ensign Kim style. I don't get any impression any other host personalities are even in them.
What you just said about Adira, that it doesn't seem like she's actually joined, I completely agree, because it still seems like, yeah, she's the Ensign Kim of the series, and they don't have any of the attributes that I would expect someone who is joined to have. As far as, like you just said, incorporating experiences, memories, personality traits.
Wisdom beyond the age.
Yes.
That's what Jadzia Dax had every once in a while, and Adira has not.
And Jadzia was always talking about Curzon and his experiences, and Adira doesn't seem to do that at all. Like you just said, we had to be like, well, is she still joined? And as I said, the only way that I thought, okay, well, she must still be because of the way the Guardian behaved, because it seemed like she was going to volunteer to take Janal's personality, but then was told that she couldn't because she already had a symbiont.
This episode, in some ways, had some Star Trek elements, but as far as execution, this was bad. This was the worst of the three. Because at least that first episode of this season, the action was reasonably well done. So I can give credit, even though they were on a Star Wars planet, I can at least give credit that the action was moving and there was stuff going on. But this episode was boring for the most part. And the only action they had was when Book and Burnham were dealing with those canyon creatures, and they were jumping around with their magic comm badges disappearing, and it just, to me, was stupid. This was the worst episode, even though I did really like the Rayner character. And I am looking forward to seeing what they do next week. I guess I'm waiting for them to ruin his character, because it's clear that they're going to make him bend to the will of Tilly and Michael Burnham in narrative. Because again, this is not a security camera and we're watching real life reality. These are writers that are writing this, so Rayner can only work as the writers make him behave. But this is like the Hemmer character, where they don't realize that if they just develop the Rayner character like he is right now without what they're going to do to him, people like me would say, you know what? At least Discovery has the Rayner character. But they're not going to let that happen, because Hemmer was my favorite character on Strange New Worlds, and they killed him off.
Yep.
Tilly and her smugness, she was insubordinate, and she must have learned that from Michael Burnham to be that level of insubordinate.
Yeah.
And previously, I was like neutral to Tilly. A lot of people like to pile on Tilly, and I was just like, I don't really care for that awkward type character she plays, but I had nothing really against the character. But yeah, after this episode, Tilly's on my crap list right now, because what she did was a horrible, bigoted thing that she did to Rayner. And if this was reality, in my opinion, she deserves to walk up to Rayner in the next episode and apologize for her bad behavior. She could still say she believes what she stated was correct, but that she realized, well, I didn't show you respect, even though you were showing me respect. We said it was a two-way street, and I didn't show you respect when you were showing me respect. But they won't. They won't write it that way. So, Tilly, she's on my list now. Michael Burnham got the X from the get-go, and Saru for a while I was okay with, but now I cross off Saru a few seasons ago. And now Tilly, I'm just crossing her off because that's a crap character. I don't know of any characters left. I mean, I guess Dr. Culber I don't really have a problem with. And Stamets I don't think I have a problem with. So I guess those two. Yeah, and it was funny too, because when Tilly was bringing these different crew members to interview at Rayner, and you were hearing their names, and I'm like, I've been watching this crap for 4 seasons, and that's that person's name? Okay. That's how horrible of a job they did in introducing any sort of useful characters on this show, that in the 5th season, I'm learning, like Rayner, what these character names are.
Well, I was looking at the characters like, have we ever seen this person on this show before?
Some of those didn't even exist before. And when Jet Reno was essentially saying, yeah, this is crap too, but they're making me do this. Yeah, I was never a big Jet Reno fan, but
until today.
On this episode, when she did that, I was like, yeah, you and Rayner are pointing out how stupid this crew is as far as their touchy-feely emotional stuff.
Well, I would much rather have someone who is competent at their job than someone who is all friends with their subordinates. I'm just saying.
Creepy cult. That's what Discovery is a creepy cult. That is my true, honest opinion, and I've thought this for several seasons.
Well, forming connections will bring meaning to your life.
Yeah, until they deliver the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Oh, God. So whatever hope I had that this season might just remain on the same level as the first 2 episodes and be bearable, nope, that's all out the window now.
Well, again, if they keep doing this Picard Season 3 comedic stuff, then maybe just making fun of how stupid they're doing stuff could make this season be worthwhile. But it's in a sad way. This is their 5th season. There are still people that say, you understand that all Star Trek series started out rough. This is the 5th season of Discovery, 3 seasons of Picard, 2 seasons of Strange New Worlds. How much more? They're still getting their legs under them. Are you willing to give this series? This is their last season.
Well, I will take this opportunity to admit that I have been watching Prodigy. I'm in season 1. Yes, there are way too many member berries, just way too many. And obviously, it's a kid's show.
And set in the JJ verse.
Yeah, and set in the JJ verse. Ugh. But as far as New Trek goes, it definitely is the best of what they've had to offer.
Yeah, at least there are pieces, because I've watched it with Molly. She made me, well, she didn't make me, but we have this one last thing we haven't tried, because we tried Lower Decks and we hate that series. But watching Prodigy, there are elements, pieces of the episodes, of some episodes, that actually are a little bit itty-bitty, have a little bit of Star Trek in them.
And I've been keeping an eye on their 3D animation too, which at some point in the future I will elaborate on more. But yeah, out of all the New Trek, definitely Prodigy is, as I said, it's the best they've had to offer.
But I don't think it's good.
No, it's not good. And
that main character, the purple kid.
Oh, he started out as a real little jerk.
Yeah, he's not as bad now, but like if they just accidentally killed him off, I would be fine with that.
Yeah, poison pill and everything these days. And, going back and rewatching the Deep Space Nine episodes that were applicable to this episode of Discovery, it really drives home that what they do now essentially is just, every episode is just navel-gazing. It's all about their personal experience. It's all about their personal feelings. And clearly anyone who wants to stay on mission is wrong. And it's like, whoa. I don't even know what to say about that, because
she was upset. Tilly was upset that Rayner wasn't trying to become part of the cult quicker.
Yeah.
He was busy doing his job instead of becoming part of the cult quicker.
Yeah, I just, as I said, it's just so offensive what they've written here that I don't even know where to start if you don't see why this is bad. So, anything that we neglected to talk about, please put it in the comments below so we can discuss it in the comment section. Because, as I said, first 2 episodes, they weren't that bad when compared to the rest of Star Trek Discovery. But this is going right down that same path with the same nasty narratives that they've had from the beginning.
Condescending.
Yeah.
You could taste the condescending nature of the meta message that they're trying to send here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'm very concerned with what the messaging is going to be for the rest of this last season. As I said, leave your comments below, and we look forward to reading them and discussing this. And thank you so much again, everyone who has subscribed to us, and anyone who's new, thank you, and welcome aboard. It's just been so overwhelming. I so appreciate what everybody has done. Until next week.
Take care.